This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2-3 page essays on the themes of Masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 567, entitled Evolutionary Psychology versus Modern Logic. Description. This flyer lashes out at some half-witted manospherers who use evolutionary psychology to claim that men are not interested in the educational level or careerism of women when choosing women to have relationships with. This benighted view is a real disservice to men, since if some random man listens to their advice and marries and has kids with a fluffie, he then faces a 1 in 4 chance of being butchered by his divorcing wife, who manslaves him and divorce rapes him. Men are much better off having relationships with FIPs. This is modern logic, which conflicts with the views of the evolutionary psychologists who extract their conclusions based on the circumstances that were valid in the distant past, that were very different and deadly compared to our time. Now the flyer itself. Evolutionary Psychology versus Modern Logic by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Hold on. Thought I'd done this. I'm getting really tired of many manospherers using evolutionary psychology to rationalize why they claim that men don't care about the level of education and careerism of women, saying that all that men care about in women is their fertility, youthfulness, and beauty. This I find really dumb and counterproductive to men's self-interest and certainly to men's general liberation. This is not to decry the value and interest of evolutionary psychology, which is a fascinating field of study in its own right and should be part of any highly intelligent and educated person's intellectual repertoire. If you want to know more about the subject, you could not go wrong in buying the Bible in the field, written by Dr. David Buss, that's B-U-S-S, entitled Evolutionary Psychology, the New Science of the Mind, 6th edition, who reports on studies on a large scale, often involving tens of thousands of people and across the planet, on, for example, men's and women's needs when selecting sexual partners. For example, for women, he lists the following 10 characteristics that universally women look for in men, which I list briefly below in bulleted form. 1. A man with resources. 2. A man with status. 3. A man a few years older than her. 4. A man who is ambitious, industrious, hard-working. 5. A man who is dependable, stable. 6. A man who is intelligent. 7. A man who is compatible. 8. A man who is big, strong. 9. A man who is in good health. 10. A man who loves and is committed to her. From an evolutionary psychological viewpoint, these desiderata of women make plenty of sense in the distant past, because a woman needs male protection when she is in a highly vulnerable state in late pregnancy and already has a bunch of kids she's looking after. Men's desiderata in women is simpler and goes as follows. 1. A woman who is fertile. 2. A woman who is youthful. 3. A woman who is pretty, beautiful. And that's it, essentially. And again, from an evolutionary psychological point of view, these male desiderata make sense in the distant past. But, and it's a very big but, these desiderata make a lot less sense in today's world than they did in the distant past, when there were strong selective pressures on human beings in a hostile and deadly environment. In today's high-tech world, women, thanks to men giving them science-based medicine, have a life expectancy of 85 years. And even those women who stay at home while their 2 kids are small still have a career window of half a century. So the Masculists are now putting enormous moral pressure on women to get off their fat parasitic asses and FIP up financially independent person, or be severely punished by men, that is, masculisted men, in brackets, who in time will become most men, the way most women today have been powerfully influenced by feminist ideas, close brackets, by not getting a man. Masculists have a hatred of fluffies, that is, the opposite of FIPs, that is, traditional women, who expect to be able to parasite off the labour and money of a man. Close brackets. Masculists see such women as manslavers and divorce rapists and hate them with a passion, the way that abolitionists in the 1800s in the US and UK hated slavers of Negroes. Masculists are out to effectively exterminate fluffies by totally ignoring them, not even pumping and dumping them, thus forcing them to rot on the shelf, thus removing their fluffy, manslaving, divorce-raping, parasite genes from the gene pool, thus wiping them out. We men have the economic power to wipe out fluffies, since by definition a fluffy can only be a fluffy if she can get her financial claws into some gullible, stupid, ignorant, in brackets, of masculist and MGTOW ideas, manslavable man who is prepared to work for her for decades of his life. Masculists are abolitionists who see manslavery as 1,000 times bigger problem than was Negro slavery, given the numbers. Masculists spit in the face of fluffies, making it very clear to them that men hate them. And if they don't FIP up, they will not only not get a man, they will be socially and sexually excluded from society, hated, rejected, reviled, excluded to the point of suicide. This deeply hateful attitude of the Masculists towards manslaving, divorce-raping fluffies contrasts sharply with some of the content makers in the manosphere who claim, based on the ideas of evolutionary psychology, that men don't care about the educational level and career achievements of women. To Masculists, this attitude is considered really dumb and ignorant, that comes from lesser minds, dumber minds, less educated minds, who do the manosphere a real disservice. Why do I say this? Because if some random guy listens to these benighted fools and marries some fluffy and has kids with her, then he faces a 1 chance in 4 of being butchered by his wife, who may drag him through the hated fluffy feminist-controlled divorce court system, rip away his kids from him with a 90% probability, lose his house to her so she can raise her kids in it, lose half his wealth and stuff to her, be forced to pay for his kids whom he will barely be allowed to see, and if his ex-wife is a real fluffy, he may be forced to pay her alimony for the rest of his life, with no legal nor moral obligation on her to get off her fat parasitic ass and FIP up by getting a job and pulling her weight for decades of her life. This treatment of 1 father in 4 in many countries so sucks for men that it has generated a murderous hatred in men for such women, and for the even more hated fluffy feminist hypocrite genociders who control these divorce courts. To have one's masculine consciousness raised means essentially to see fluffydom as man-slavery. In brackets, that is, the core idea of masculism is that it is a rebellion by men against being man-slaves to women, working for women for decades of a man's life, close brackets. And to see man-slavery as slavery, and hence hated, and a war issue. Masculists are at war against the fluffies and aim to wipe them out. Masculists see women as having a career window of half a century, so that women have a very powerful moral duty to FIP up, so that if they don't, then Masculists will kill them, slowly, by forcing them to die a slow, miserable death, forced to rot on the shelf, manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and totally rejected. In today's world, fluffies are vermin to Masculists, to be exterminated, so that men no longer have to pay the traditional humongous price of being a manslave to a woman for decades of his life just to get a bit of mediocre sex from her once in a blue moon. Those days are long over. Masculists now put enormous moral pressure on women to FIP up or die. So when Masculists hear half-witted manospherers who claim that men don't care about the level of education and career accomplishment of women, they sneer at them. Often these half-witted manospherers are black, and hence a lot dumber than whites, in brackets, who have an average IQ superiority of 15 IQ points above the blacks, close brackets, but also sometimes are rather conservative, flyover state whites, who are equally benighted and dumb. It's obvious to Masculists that for a woman to be a FIP, she needs to be well educated and career competent so that she can pull her financial weight and not expect, fluffy style, to be able to parasite off the money and labour of a man. Therefore, it should be obvious to most thinking men that it is very much in men's self-interest, if they don't want to be manslaved and divorce raped by a hated fluffy, that they reject fluffies, forcing them to rot on the shelf, and instead prefer to have relationships with FIP women, who have bothered to get career competent educations at high school and college, so that they become real FIPs as adults, and not expect to leech off the sweat of some stupid, ignorant, manslavable man. As most men become masculisted, the supply of such gullible, manslavable men will dry up, and the fluffies will die off. So the remaining women are nearly all FIPs, thus deeply liberating men from man's slavery, a true liberation of men, and one of the most profound political goals of the Masculists. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Manslaves to Women, an e-textbook of 560 plus Masculist flyers for men's studies courses, freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.